Good afternoon, and welcome back to the Denver Church of Christ weekly recap. Now, typically, I have been opening up these videos with a skit of some sort, usually with myself, and I try and be humorous or kind of introduce the topic in some sort of lighthearted way. But to be honest, this week it doesn't feel quite appropriate to open up with a skip or with humor, given the events of the week and the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And I've struggled a lot as a minister and as a friend and as a leader with what are the right ways to respond to a murder like this and to injustice, and how do we minister to our family and friends in the African American community? How do we minister to those who are afraid and those who are angry? And in all of those questions, there are no easy answers. And the other day, I was praying in the morning. I was walking around, and I think the question that I really battle with is, if Jesus were here today, if he was walking the earth today and he was alive and he was in the midst of us, and something like this happens, how does Jesus respond in these moments? Like, what would he do if he was in my position? Right? What would he do as a white man, and what would he do as a black man or as a black mother? How would he respond to events like this? And I do sincerely believe that the reality behind that answer can legitimately be different for different people, and which also causes some of the friction behind the way that people want one another to respond and act. And even bringing this up, I think can cause friction, because I think when some people think of Jesus, they think of a pacifist and someone who would not fight and someone who would not act during this time. And that's not my view of Jesus. But I think when you bring Jesus into this situation and as a question, I think that people can feel like, okay, you're bringing this up to pacify the issue when there is so much anger and fear and disappointment and mistrust and hopelessness. And certainly that's not my intention in the question I was asking myself. And I've struggled with this. What would Jesus do in this time and period a lot during this week? And it's hard to hear the pain that people feel and the anger that people feel. It's hard to resist trying to fix it or come up with try and figure out solutions. And deep down, I know that, let's just say that somehow in the U.S., we figured out a solution to stop all racism in the U.S. There's no doubt in my mind that we would find new ways to hate one another. And so, and that doesn't mean I'm hopeless that things could get better. I do think that things will get better. I do think that God will have mercy on us and that God will bring justice. But I also think that we will mess it up again, that we will bring some sort of new hatred into our world, as people all over the world do in different countries. And yet, that doesn't necessarily help me in knowing what can I do as a Jesus follower to help my friends and my family that are in so much pain. That where a murder like this causes just indescribable frustration and pain. And I don't have an answer. I struggle with the answer on this. I think the one of the verses that I came back to was when Jesus' friend Lazarus died, and everybody was so upset. And if Jesus had come earlier, and this is in John 11, like if you had just been here earlier, it wouldn't have happened. And I don't know if there was an intended accusation against Jesus for maybe taking his time or not trying to get here ahead of time. When people are grieving, the anger that comes out, it can be directed in a lot of different ways that's hard to describe in the moment or hard to explain in the moment. And oftentimes later, you just chalk it up to the fact that it's just grief, and people are sometimes inconsolable, and there's not a lot of rationale to how people feel when there is grief, and it's not appropriate to try and apply a rationale either. And so they were, asking Jesus, man, if you'd just been here earlier, everything would have been fine. And Jesus asks where Lazarus is. and he goes in and he sees all the family weeping and grieving. And in verse 35, so I think it might be the shortest verse in the Bible. It just says that Jesus wept. And and what is striking about this is because he knows exactly what he's about to do. He knows that he's about to raise Lazarus from the dead, and he knows that everything is going to be fine. And pretty soon there's going to be rejoicing. There's going to be actual celebration. But before that moment came, before a solution to the problem came, before God granted mercy in this situation, Jesus took the time to weep with those who are grieving. And I guess that's one of the only clear answers that I can come up with during this time for how I can walk like Jesus during moments like this, is that I need to weep and I need to grieve with my brothers and my sisters and my family who have been hit so hard, not obviously just by this event. This event in a vacuum is tragic, but this event is one in a stream of events and in a brutal history of events. And so in any case, those are my thoughts for this week, is that all of us, this is a time to bind up the wounds. This is a time to do what we can to be family to one another. And that means that even though we have a great hope, even though we know that this world is, what we see in the world is not our future, that what happens here today is not the kingdom that we're a part of. We're a part of a completely different kingdom. All of that is true, and yet Jesus still took the time to weep, and so do we. We have to take the time to grieve and to mourn and to understand the fear and the anger of the people in our lives who are living through something that some of us don't live through. And so I love you guys all. Again, I look so forward to seeing all of you soon. Tonight at 5 p.m. we have a prayer night, specifically to just pray about justice in this country, to mourn and to lament the death of another murder of an African American man, and to just plead with God to help us during these times. And so I look forward to seeing many of you there. Tomorrow, really feel the need to say this. Tomorrow's sermon is the last sermon in a series that we've been doing called The Investors. And our services are planned well ahead of time, and because we're in this time of COVID, everything's recorded ahead of time. And so the sermon tomorrow has absolutely nothing to do with the events of this week. And there is definitely the possibility for that to feel very dissonant with the feelings of the many feelings that people have regarding the death of George Floyd. And I apologize for that right away. It's just that all of this is done so far ahead of time. We considered trying to refilm. It's just very difficult for us to redo everything. So in any case, I did just want to say that we will have a special announcement at the beginning acknowledging the death of George Floyd. But the sermon itself will not quite hit the needs during this time. We're hoping that our prayer night this week and our great event next week on Untold Stories will also be a time for us to connect and to understand one another. A time of catharsis, even perhaps for the weeping and the mourning and the anger. But in any case, we love everyone in the Denver church. We love our brothers and sisters in the African American community that are feeling this, and honestly, those who are just in a minority community that might just be feeling this as well. My prayers are with all of you, and we love you, and we feel for you, and we are with you. God bless.